the music scene before Elvis and the music scene after Elvis. This is how things are defined. This is how John Lennon defined the history of rock and roll. But we are talking here about Baz Luhrmann's Elvis. Now, this film, which recently came out, it's a big hit, and it, in fact, in some sectors, it even outran Top Gun Maverick. The thing about the film is that basically Luhrmann has made a very interesting, it's a Brechtian musical take on Elvis. I mean, it is not a film, and there are many critics who have understood how the film moves, how the film behaves. The reason is that it doesn't have a linear plot. It doesn't have a beginning, middle, and end in the conventional sense. That, this was Elvis and this is how he grew, and this was the man behind the music, or this was the music behind the man. There are no such pretensions in Baz Luhrmann, who made Moulin Rouge, another unforgettable musical. Now, the technique used in Elvis is to directly pose certain assumptions about Elvis right from the beginning, that he is a legend, he is a star. This is there even when we see Elvis as a child, even when we see him growing up. It's not a realistic kind of Aristotelian aesthetics. And so this whole thing that this is a star we are watching is there right from the beginning. It is written on the face of the film. And the focus of the director is what Elvis actually did to his fans. And that is the political message in the film, of girls screaming, of girls really coming apart. And this wouldn't have been possible in a Spielberg type take, or even in a normal linear structure. So you had to show these fast cuts. You had to show the kind of Eisensteinian madness here to really give the impact of how Elvis impacted the generation, how Elvis revolutionized music from slow, especially of the white folks, because by the 50s, you had this underground black scene which had been evolving right since the days of Louis Armstrong from jazz. And, they had incorporated blues. And there was this whole underground rock scene which was emerging. And but on the other hand, we had white musicians, where, with the exception of Frank Sinatra, who was kind of a Marxist in the American sense, and who wrote songs on like This Town and songs on class struggle. Otherwise, the white American music was very tame. It was tame, and it lacked those beats. It lacked this the thing which the youth were feeling at that time. And Elvis suddenly came, and he just changed the entire picture. Instead of those slow country music type of songs, Hank Snow and others, the kind of conservative direction, and politically also America in that era, 50s, if you see, these were when Eisenhower was the president, the immediate post-war years, and America was really it was the height of Republican conservatism. I mean, it was McCarthyism, the witch hunt of the liberal and the left in the American cultural space in Hollywood. Then you have Elvis, who actually comes out with songs like Hound Dog, and who comes out with songs like Jailhouse Rock. And one after the other, he starts gyrating, he starts shaking his pelvis, Elvis the pelvis, as you know, and he brings out that, that animal spirit, which had been suppressed by conventional bourgeois morality of the post-Second World War world. And this was the emphatic message which Elvis carried, and which has always been missed in articles on him, which portray him as this playboy kind of a Casanova who just happened to be a star and just whose career was cut short by drugs and who just slumped, which is not true, because Luhrmann's film shows the revolutionary impact of Elvis. Even when he is sliding down, he is still a man who retains the and who remembers the kind of radical shift he had undertaken. Here, the question is a very interesting question is that the film also shows Elvis getting proscribed, the conservative politicians coming out against Elvis. He is even arrested during a concert, and these were the 60s, and we also see Elvis deeply disturbed by the assassination of Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy in 1968, and he wants to take his songs in a more political direction. In fact, there is also an episode in the film where where he's supposed to sing those "Save Christmas Carol" type of songs, and he ends up with throwing some real political shit around. The point here is that what people don't know, Elvis actually was far more radical than many of the late 60s, early 70s rock and roll and hard rock musicians. And if you compare him with Beatles, you will find that Beatles started as very safe British kids, and with love songs and all, Love Love Me Do and others, and then slowly they branched out into some really radical stuff. And John Lennon came out with Working Class Hero and later Imagine. And before that, in 1968-69, they came out with the song Revolution. And in fact, that song Revolution talks about, in fact, it criticizes students who were on the streets in Europe trying to overthrow their respective regimes. And they were carrying portraits of Chairman Mao. And in fact, the song Revolution by Beatles, it says that I'm all for revolution, but please don't carry pictures of Chairman Mao. There is a stanza. Elvis, on the other hand, he was the original radical, and we see that in the age of radicalism, Elvis actually being suppressed, coming down, and actually not allowed to kind of sing his kind of songs. But there were other American bands like Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple, and so many other bands who were emerging and who really radicalized, took music to more radical directions. And the reason I'm trying to understand is that why was Elvis proscribed while Beatles were allowed to kind of grow in a certain direction, in a certain radical direction? American music in general, hard rock, was allowed to grow in quite a radical direction with various. Yeah, I mean, even Pink Floyd and all coming in that in the 70s. The reason which I find is that while American politics, while American society was getting radicalized, and with people like Elvis and with the civil rights movement setting the backdrop, in the late American politics was actually going in a conservative direction, and the Democratic Party was shattered in 1968 by the assassination of Robert Kennedy. After that, we had Richard Nixon, and 1968 to 1972, 72 to 76. I mean 75 actually, just before Watergate scandal. So American politics was moving in a conservative direction. At the same time, if you see British politics, there the Labour Party was on the ascendant. And so you have a scenario where in Europe, there were like, student revolts, and there was this music scene which was, you had a scenario where basically politics also was moving in a, if not completely left, then at least a center left direction. And Elvis was a victim of, he was the right musician at not a wrong time, but at a wrong era of politics. And others were the right musician at the right in the right era of politics. And music, and the relationship between art and politics, or between music and politics, is not always a linear one. I mean, you have an inverted relationship where political currents can go in one direction and art can go in another direction. But in say, the European context, or in another context, they can also move simultaneously. Another very important point which needs to be remembered is that 60s were a period where America was the leading force of the capitalist bloc, and it was the height of Cold War, and the American conservative forces, the American finance capital, was trying to consolidate its grip over society, and it was also trying to combat USSR. So it was very important for America to combat an Elvis type of influence. Whereas Europe, as the junior cousin, I mean, Europe was also part of the NATO alliance, but as a junior partner of the US, probably Europe had much more freedom, and it was passing through a different phase politically. So this is what, guys, this has been the complex relationship, and in future also, I hope to bring such connections which are normally missed